What do you think of when you hear the term cosmic horror? Does it conjure up images of grotesque, phallic-like aliens invading spaceships? Do you think of creatures from other worlds landing on the Earth, terrorizing the planet? Perhaps some of you merely think of the darkness of the sky, the all-encompassing void that surrounds us. None of you would be wrong, as each of those examples are certainly aspects of the subgenre. When I look to the stars and think of the horror that might exist in the cosmos, my mind jumps to the unexplainable. Giant, squid-like space creatures who feed on light, multi-dimensional beings who exist outside of time, entities who radiate colors that are invisible to the human eye. I think of the unthinkable, the unexplainable, and the unknowable. And I am far from the first person to ever consider that. As you're probably aware, H.P. Lovecraft was one of the first storytellers to delve into the world of cosmic horror. Lovecraft popularized cosmic horror through his dozens of short stories, most notable among them being Call of Cthulhu, The Color Out of Space, and The Shadow over Innsmouth. He was able to describe the unknown, igniting a whole new subgenre of horror in the process. In the 102 years since his first book, his works have been mimicked, retold, and adapted time and time again. Cosmic horror evolved from the pages of his original texts into what it is today. Now, the subgenre spans books, movies, and video games. It focuses on the strongest and most primal emotion of humanity, the fear of the unknown. Hallmarks of cosmic horror include tentacled leviathans, trippy, almost psychedelic visuals, aliens with no real shape or form, beasts speaking in strange tongues, and above all else, a focus on the power of celestial entities. Take, for instance, 2019's Color Out of Space. This is an adaptation of the H.P. Lovecraft novel of the same name. In it, a family finds that a meteor has crashed into their backyard. Not long after the crash, they find that a rainbow-colored liquid has seeped out of the meteor, infecting their water supply. In the ensuing days, the color, quote-unquote, mutates the body and mind of each family member. It causes them to hallucinate, contort, and eventually fuse together. Horrific, yes, but why? What makes it scary? There's no monster, no mass killer, and in all reality, no one to even blame. The titular color is merely existing. There's no malice in its actions, no ill will. There doesn't even seem to be any intent behind its infection of the family. Color doesn't affect anyone outside of the home. There's nothing distinct about the thing harming them, only that it simply is. It's indescribable, formless, impossible to read because it's impossible to see and know. The same description can apply to countless other entities in cosmic horror. Annihilation has what's known as the Shimmer. The Thing has, the Thing. Bloodborne has the Great Ones. The Call of Cthulhu has its titularly named character, Cthulhu. Now, these titles I just mentioned, they're all firmly underneath the cosmic horror umbrella. But what if we applied that same description to another horror genre? One that seems completely removed from the concept of space entirely. What comes to mind when you hear the word God? It's a charged word, to be sure. Your God, my God, God light, God damn, God almighty. That one three-letter word permeates nearly every aspect of our lives, regardless of your chosen religion or lack thereof. It calls on a higher power, something stronger than us, something older. God is not a name. It is a title we give to a being outside of our mortal comprehension. The dedication of disciples and their belief in the existence of devils below and God above have been the spotlight of horror media for decades. Even the original text of the Bible gets pretty horrific at times. It talks of human sacrifice, apocalyptic creatures, and plagues and spirits that wipe out entire civilizations. The worship of believers can be equally frightening in the right context. Chanting, praying to statues, speaking to seemingly no one. To them, it makes complete sense, but to an outsider, it can be a little frightening. Films and media tend to fall into one of the three overarching subgenres: demonic horror, cult horror, and divine horror. Let's start with demonic horror. Demonic horror focuses on a malicious entity, one that may or may not be visible, but certainly has the intent to harm. This would include films such as The Exorcist, The Conjuring, and even The Evil Dead. These movies all have defined antagonistic goals. They are cut and dry evil. That is what we are told, that is what the characters believe. They are nothing but evil and want ill will towards the protagonist. The characters, and by extension the audience, can easily understand this evil entity's motivation. Oftentimes, these movies are classic tales of good versus evil. And despite the controversy that some of these movies have garnered, such as The Exorcist, they often prove to be the most successful with general audiences. The structure is familiar, it's predictable, and it's just scary enough to be fun, but it's not outright unsettling. The second subgenre is cult horror. The belief itself is the subject of fear in this. As mentioned before, the devotion of followers can be intimidating, and even frightening to outsiders. This side of religious horror elevates those fears. Movies like Saint Maud, The Wicker Man, and Heretic all use the audience's fear of fanatic religious behavior. Oftentimes, a deity doesn't even appear in these movies. Take The Wicker Man, for instance. We have no definite proof that the god they are praying to exists or not, and it's implied by the ending that it was all a sham, brought up by somebody who wanted to control a civilization. The horror is derived from the actions of the faithful. Whether that be self-mutilation, prophetic ramblings, or cult-like behavior, these films prey on our fear of one another. The third and final subgenre, which I will call divine horror, doesn't focus on the devil or demons or even on humanity. It focuses on God himself, or at the very least, godlike entities. Things unseen that obey whims unknowable to humans. Their true goals aren't revealed or even hinted at. They do not fall cleanly onto a morality slider, and the entity never makes any effort to clear that up. These movies focus on beings that are so powerful, they don't have a true goal. They simply exist, the creatures around them be damned. Much of the horror is derived from the mental anguish they inflict on their victims. Such films would include The Blair Witch Project and Skinamarink, with video games like Blasphemous doing the same, albeit at a far larger scale. They emphasize a fear of the divine. Gods cannot ever be known or understood by humans. Their passions and choices transcend humanity. That unpredictability is terrifying. So, we have three subgenres: demonic, cult, and divine horror. One fears the dark, one fears itself, and one fears the light. Is any of this sounding familiar? Cosmic horror is incredibly intertwined with the horror of the divine, dating back to its origins. Cthulhu, one of the most obvious examples, was considered by Lovecraft to be an elder god. The intermixing of the cosmos and religion grew. Movies like Event Horizon and They Live sought to cross religion and space. As the gaming landscape grew, video games too began to adapt this and retell the stories of Lovecraft. Games like Dead Space and Bloodborne introduced this style of horror to more audiences. Religious horror and cosmic horror almost grew up together. As such, cosmic horror tends to follow the same tropes and patterns as religious horror. The cosmic equivalent of demonic horror would be what I could discuss in the opening. Movies like Alien, Life, and War of the Worlds all fall into this category. They have a visible and prevalent threat in them. There are defined stakes and consequences, a clear antagonist, and they often have enjoyable but narratively predictable stories. These are films about the things lurking in the dark. They are often the most popular with audiences due to their relatively low scare factor, approachable themes, and tendency to lean towards spectacle. The second subgenre is the fear of the self and community. This is where the religious parallels become more overt in the films. Characters in these movies often become obsessed with the cosmos, or an entity residing in it. They worship, they sacrifice, and they pray to a being from the stars. These films aren't quite as common, but as previously mentioned, video games such as Dead Space, Bloodborne, and Lies of P explore these tropes excellently. They center around the idea of worship, believing they know the will of our gods. The fear here is the same as in religious horror, fear of our neighbor who sees things that we can't. The third style of cosmic horror is, like in religious horror, a fear of the unknowable. These subgenres sees characters go insane from the effects of an unknown entity. We see people mutate, their bodies mangled in ways never seen by the human eye. This would include films like Annihilation, Event Horizon, and the 2019 adaptation of Color Out of Space. These subgenres often intermingle with each other, as shown in Event Horizon and The Ritual. Both simultaneously focus on a fear of the unknowable divine and a fear of cults. Ultimately, though, both cosmic horror and religious horror boil down to the same three categories: a fear of a creature, fear of the self, and fear of the unknowable. These three tropes are certainly not distinct to religious and cosmic horror, but it is undeniable that the two subgenres are two sides of the same coin. Fear of the unknown, they say. You never know who or what might be watching.